Okay, welcome back. So let me continue our discussion of geography. Now, other than the location of countries, size of the country is also important. Now, the question here is whether it is advantageous of being a large or a small country. What do you think?
It depends.
Depends on what?
Population maybe being advantageous for the labor force.
Okay. So you are kind of assuming that if the geographical size is big, population must also be big. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That must be true for pre-industrial societies, but not perhaps for industrial countries. I mean, there could be a relation. I'm confident of that, but what else? Depends on what else.
Natural resources, maybe.
Okay, so what's the assumption here? So if a country has a large geographical size, this means it is more likely to have natural resources.
Yeah.
Then, so it's an advantage.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're gonna discuss why in some cases having a large amount of natural resources is actually not very good for long run growth. What else? So compare for let's think about examples. Compare, for instance, China, this huge size, right? Historically a unified empire, and compare it with, let's say, Netherlands. Or compare it with Italy, or I don't know, Austria.
Large scale of production?
Large scale of production. Well, for long years before China made its transition, actually large scale production was a European phenomenon, right? European and American phenomenon. So China is not particularly famous for that. Right now, yes. Right now, China is the factory of the world, but was not so for a long period of time, especially if you compare China with the European nations. Think about how do you run a country that is too large versus how do you run a country that is not too large and also surrounded by similarly sized small countries as in Europe. What are the differences associated with that? Consider, for instance, Ottoman Empire as well, right? Huge. Imagine the largest expansion date of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century, for instance, right? So there's this huge empire, large number of cities all across 3 continents, and
it is harder.
Well, yes, that's the idea. So in one sense, having a unified government, a strong central government, either within an empire or as a republic, doesn't really make a big difference actually. But suppose that you have this strong government. So that's, if you think about it first, you may think that it's a nice thing, right? So a strong government take fast, effective decisions and implement these decisions in time. So growth policy or development policy should be good. But historically, if you look at historical examples, this is not the case. Why? Again, compare China and the European countries. China is big, but and Ottoman Empire is big, but these empires have no fear for competition, right? So they're already huge and very powerful. So no small country or any other rival empire really credibly could threat these big empires. So this means their governments have been have not been subject to certain checks and balances. Okay, in Europe, for instance, there is always a competition. For instance, if you want to oppress people very harshly in China, you can do that as the emperor. But you cannot do it in Europe because people just basically run away. Right? Same is true for innovators. In the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan can prohibit certain stuff, right? Or, you know, basically declares some stuff illegal, and you have nowhere to go. You are living in the middle of central Anatolia, let's say. Well, in Europe, it's not the case. European states are very small, so you can always fly away as an innovator. So for this reason, actually, there is a literature called enlightened monarchs. So in Europe, especially in 18th century, you see certain jurisdictions, certain city-states or small states, where the monarch there or the lord that is responsible for that land is actually an enlightened leader that supports innovation, art, natural philosophy, and all this stuff. Because if you are not tolerant about these things, if you are not let people behave, if you are not a fair dictator, then people can always run away because Europe is much less concentrated in that sense. So power in Europe is not concentrated. But in Ottoman Empire, in Roman Empire, in China, these huge lands, the size of the country in that respect is an important fact. So you can check Weil, David Weil's text is in your reading list. Under the heading geography, he gives many examples, many historical examples. Now, so let's summarize what we've discussed. Location matters through agglomeration and through agglomeration and spillovers. Size matters through governance. Okay. And there is, of course, trade and growth. Okay. So both size and location matters for both trade and growth. Why? So here I'm using trade and growth as a single category. So first thing is that if your neighbors are all open to trade, we define trade openness usually as the ratio of exports and imports divided by GDP, right? So if ratio is large, we say that countries are more open to trade. And if you are surrounded with countries that have trade openness ratios, okay, so there could be many countries, and in fact, many years, you can keep track of this statistics. So if you are surrounded with many countries that have high trade shares within GDP, then this means that region of the world will have some logistical advantages and some high degree of real economic activity in terms of transnational trade. So that might benefit you because you might realize some positive externalities from other countries. Ports, international ports, human mobilities, things such as airplane traffic that promotes human mobility, and all sorts of things create that create those types of advantages for trade and growth. Okay, so that's an important part. A couple of years back in Turkey, there was this argument about Turkey must be a logistical leader in the Middle East, right? Because Turkey has this specific, highly specific geographical and political components to its thanks to its location and culture. So it is truly a bridge between East and West. So Turkey should be a logistically important center for the world trade. So there were projects and some discussions in the public spaces about where should that be. So the main opposition party, People's Republican Party, so they were having this project, this secret project sort of thing, and eventually that was not the case. So eventually that project has never been actually realized by the ruling government, but that was perhaps not a bad idea. Another interesting thing that connects all these three components, so location, size, and those effects on trade and growth, is the famous example by Paul Romer on charter cities. Okay, so charter cities are places, so they are cities, urban environments, where you give certain privileges to firms operating in those cities, and you give certain privileges for people working in these cities, or you give certain privileges to certain sectors that will invest in these charter cities. So you give tax benefits, you give certain you make certain infrastructure investments as the government, for instance, so that creates externalities for all the firms operating there. So the good examples are in China, in the Schengen region, I guess, or maybe Schengen. I may be mispronouncing it, but you can Google it. There's a nice TED talk by Paul Romer on charter cities, and you're gonna learn why geographical location and size is important to determine which cities in a country can be charter cities. For instance, one important characteristic is, of course, access to the seas and oceans, right? So if you want to create a charter city with certain benefits and very fast, so no bureaucratical burden, very fast implementation of business formation, all this stuff, then first of all, you should look at the sea coast and try to locate this charter city close to the international airports and international ports where you can transport your stuff, including workers and produced goods, and so on and so forth. So location and size then matters for agglomerations, flowers, governance, and the creation of trade and growth relationships. I mean, trade relationships and growth sports. Okay, again, there is a TED video by Paul Romer on charter cities. It's a very fascinating video. I would like you to check that. Now, what I'm going to talk about next is climate. And when I say climate, I basically mean three important subtopics. One is agricultural productivity. Oops. Okay. The other is disease environment. And the other is human productivity, or worker productivity in manual jobs. Okay. Now let's first think about agricultural productivity. What you know since the perhaps elementary school is that, so Turkey is a country, right? So if you think about Turkey having a shape, having a shape like this. So what do you have? Well, we have certain climate differences within the country, right? So in the middle, we have a particular climate. In the coastal region, we have a particular climate, right? And in the mountain region, we have other climate. And here, there is another part where there's no mountains, but there's still, and there's no coast either as well, right? So this is sea. Now, what is the effect of this? What are the effects of such a distribution for Turkey on agricultural productivity? Well, in certain regions, certain products are very productively grown, right? Right? What are these? Well, in Çukurova, you have the citrus type products, right? Oranges, tangerine, and all this stuff. In Black Sea region, with very, very high rainfall, you have what? You have most famously tea, right?
Nuts.
Nuts as well, yes. Hazelnuts, right? Actually, the best hazelnut across the world in terms of quality. And what do we grow in the central Anatolia?
Wheat.
Wheat and all other crops and other stuff, right? Legumes and all the stuff. And here, what do we do most in Eastern Anatolia?
Hayvancılık.
Animal husbandry, right? So we grow animals, and they have this large open fields for being fed. So even in one country although Turkey is a special country in that respect, even in one country, we see a diverse distribution of different climates and associated distribution with respect to the types of products we can grow and this productivity, right? So for certain products, we have no productivity at all. I mean, I'm not talking about Turkey now. Many countries.
Hocam bir şey ekleyebilir miyim acaba?
Yes, you can.
Şimdi Türkiye'de bu çeşitlilikten kaynaklı çok fazla evet üretim olanakları var çoğu maddede ama bunun işte işlenip satılması oranında ki yetkinlikler aslında teknolojik gelişme olsun, işte transportation olsun. Buralarda eksik kaldığımız için bunun bize faydası çok daha düşük oluyor. Yani bunu düzgün değerlendirme noktası da önemli değil mi burada?
It surely is, but my point here is that from going from Turkey's example to the entire world, what I want to stress is that different climate conditions create different levels of agricultural productivity for many countries, right? So you are right. Yes, Turkey is a good country in terms of climate conditions for agricultural production. In fact, a very large variety of products can be grown in Turkey, but Turkey faces certain logistical problems and the middleman problems. So yes, they're present, and most importantly, in Turkey, agriculture is not mechanized in a large extent, right? So I don't know. Netherlands is a much smaller country than Turkey, but a bigger agricultural exporter. So there are many problems of Turkish agriculture. My point here is that I'm using Turkey as an example to motivate why climate differences are important for agricultural productivity. Okay, thank you for the contribution. So climate conditions then matter for agricultural productivity because in certain products there is no productivity, in certain products there is low productivity, and in certain products there is high productivity. And why is that important? Well, it is, if you first think about history, agricultural productivity was important in supporting industrialization, right? The famous example is, of course, England. So in that country, agricultural productivity was large, and thanks to black death as well, so there were less people in the in the 14th century. Somewhere in the 14th century, population basically decreased a lot, and that gave a certain bargaining power to workers as well. So those things created the appropriate conditions for the feudal system to dissolve early in English agriculture. And agricultural productivity supported the movement of workers from agriculture to newly flourishing in industry in 18th century, right? So there was this push effect, and there was also, of course, the pull effect because industrial sector was innovative, right? So in general, agricultural productivity is important in that respect. There is also the channel where what do you produce is important for where to specialize in, right? So if you are very productive in certain agricultural products, especially in a single product or only a few products, there are some countries for which some people use the notion of banana republic. You know what banana republic is, right?
Yes.
Muz Cumhuriyeti. So if you are that type of a country, you may be very productive in only one product, and that's a bad sign, right? Why? Because now your entire country is dependent on that product. If something happens in terms of export opportunities, right? For instance, there could be, suppose that European Union is your biggest customer, and you are selling this particular agricultural product in raw form to European Union, and usually it is not really, so the safety regulations dictate this particular product includes at least X units of, I mean, at most X units of a certain chemical, but then suppose that regulations change in the European Union and X becomes 3X. Suddenly, you cannot sell your product to European Union. Okay? So that's a huge problem. So climate conditions create export commodity dependence and import commodity dependence as well. In certain cases, you are dependent on food imports, right? Because your country cannot grow those things. And then if you are import dependent, of course, the question is whether you have enough money to buy or you don't have enough money to buy. In some countries, they have the oil, so they have no problem. But in some other countries, such as those in sub-Saharan Africa, they are both export and import dependent, and they have no natural resources to trade for the food. That's their most important problem. So now we have 2 minutes if you have very quick questions. Otherwise, we're going to take another break. And we're going to, of course, continue with our discussion of climate conditions.
No question, thank you.
Okay. Then let's meet at 2:50 and finalize our discussion of geography and development and growth. Okay.